So welcome everybody to our webinar series. We've been doing this for, I think, 3.5 years now. So we'd love, anyway, glad you're here to join us. With me today is just Arnie and I. Nancy's off doing something else today. So Arnie's one of our business process improvement gurus, and he's going to be leading the conversation today. If you're new to our webinar series, just know we typically hit the content and then open it up for Q&A. So all along the way, just feel free to enter into the chat if you have any questions. The topic for today, Arnie, go back to the other one. Or I know, well, the topic for today is how to reduce onboarding time and errors using SharePoint. And then the topic for next week is how to identify continuous improvement opportunities. And I'm going to enter into chat some links for you. So it's to register for next month's webinars at the bottom. The case study I'm going to cover today is going to be the link there, and you can sign up for our newsletter and other things. So I'm just going to cover. Oh, go ahead, Arnie. What'd you say?
We're already missing Nancy. That's
yeah, right.
That's with the technology. So I'm sorry.
That's okay. So perfect. So I'll just touch on a couple things, and then Arnie is going to go ahead and get into the topic of the day. So our strategy at CTC Productivity is really to help companies solve business issues leveraging Microsoft 365. We don't sell 365. We aren't trying to tell people they should use it just to use it. And go ahead, Arnie, you can flip. Typically, the business challenges, whenever we hear people struggling with any of these things, organization, collaboration, communication, we know that there's something in Microsoft 365 they should be exploring. And we often joke that when companies have back-to-back meetings, that is indicative of one of these things not working, because when you're not communicating well, everybody calls a meeting. You're not collaborating well, everybody calls a meeting. So kind of a warning sign that they probably should be exploring 365. Most companies, we're still seeing this split really, where most companies are hybrid, and then there's some full remote or some full in the office. But everybody's got the person that wakes up in the morning and didn't plan to work from home, but needs to work from home with a sick kid. And so getting onto 365 is really an important strategy for any sort of model, whether you're hybrid or fully in the office. There's still a need to access anything from anywhere on your phone, no matter what type of business model you have. And we've been covering case studies in our webinars. We have a brand new one today. It's super excited to talk about. We covered it in a webinar, I think last month or the month before. And so now we have the case study. And so this one is about a wealth management group, and what was happening. The challenge they were having is the CEO was working too much in the business, not really on the business, looking more strategically at how to run the organization. They had hired actually a number of staff, but actually more balls were dropping with when you have more players. It's almost like having too many cooks in the kitchen. It can get really confusing unless everybody understands their roles and they have the right tools, et cetera. And so ultimately, they really needed better processes and tools. So that was their challenge. The solution is the CEO hired me for personal one-on-one coaching. And we definitely did a lot to increase our personal productivity. We focused on how to run effective meetings, effective delegation, time management strategies, lots of different things. But what typically happens, and you're probably seeing a pattern in our case studies, is when I'm in coaching a leader within a company, I firsthand can see where they have wasted time. And so definitely spotted that she was spending way much time, more time than she needed on some tasks, and her team was actually very unproductive as well. So the team productivity issues were that internal discussions were getting lost in email because they had too many emails. They couldn't access information when they were out of the office, so it really limited their productivity. And managing customer activity specifically was a really time-consuming task for all of them. And that was one of the main reasons the CEO kept being in the business more than working on the business. And they had explored their CRM tool to see if there's any way it could help improve their ability to look at all the customer activities. But what they found is it had limited transparency. So what that means is there wasn't really an easy way to look at a bird's eye view of the status of all the activity going on with their customers. Due dates would pass, and it was not very clear, that it was past. It would disappear from sight. There was no clarity that a project maybe had been stuck for a while, and it just wasn't easy to spot issues basically using their CRM. But their CRM, I will tell you, is an excellent CRM for what it needed to do. It just had some gaps. And the other thing with the CRM is it had a very complicated workflow. So it was they were difficult to set up. They were overly complicated for setting up simple changes, like maybe an address change for a customer. Reports were hard to pull and hard to read and understand. And what the team found is just the whole process was extremely frustrating. So the solution is we moved the discussions over out of email into the Microsoft Teams environment. And this was one of Arnie's clients. So Arnie did all this, not me. And move the data over into SharePoint, the data that they needed to see, and into the Teams environment. And Arnie built out a SharePoint tool to help supplement their CRM. And we're doing that a lot. There's kind of a theme on a lot of our case studies that there'll be a really good piece of software, but it's got some limitations. And so we build out often tools to supplement that particular piece of software. In this particular case, it was a CRM. And I'm sorry, and if you don't know what a CRM is, it's a customer relationship management system. So many companies will use it to drive their sales funnel, and often do even more than that, like try to manage actually day-to-day activities within that tool. And so the results were the internal discussions were way more efficient. Arnie had taught them how to use chat and then use channels in the most efficient and effective way for running their business. They now can access anything from anywhere on any device because we've moved everything into SharePoint and Teams environment. And so it was really creating like a centralized portal within the Teams environment for them to get at everything they needed on their day-to-day business. And the SharePoint solution, this is our client's words, was a total game changer. They quickly were able to get status updates, find out what activities and things were going on. The CEO was completely confident in the team now that they could manage their activities and their tasks, and she didn't need to be down in the weeds with them. They now have a better vision and clarity of all the moving parts in the business. Every team member is able to filter data to look at specifically what they need to see. And by doing that, they can often filter in on the same sort of follow-up work. So then they could batch it and then do the exact same sort of work for the 10 different clients that needed the same activity. And they would just love the fact they could sort by any key field and within one click. Let's see, the other things they really liked is that the notes for the clients moved with the status. So that was a limitation in the CRM. And the accuracy dramatically improved with their ability to manage everything. They loved that the system was actually really flexible. And ultimately, they went from being really kind of stressed out to a lot of happiness and peace of mind, knowing the business was, balls weren't dropping. We always like to do kind of a identify kind of the ROI of our work at the end. So the coaching and the project work combined was just a little bit over $10,000. There's no ongoing cost when we build out a solution. So many softwares that you purchase, there's an ongoing subscription fee, but not when you build out an application in SharePoint. So it's a one-time project cost to have us build that for you and no ongoing cost. And there were lots of benefits already we listed, but one calculated ROI we could come up with is they're actually, each of the 3 team members is saving 10 hours a week. And so when you annualize that out, that's saving them really 3/4 of a full-time equivalent, a full-time person. So as you can see here, the cost of 10,000 is barely anything considering the savings of almost 1 less headcount needed to run the business. So anyway, that is the power of Microsoft Teams and SharePoint and how to solve business issues. So Arnie, I think you're up.
I believe I am. If you want to handle the lobby, I'll start.
I got the lobby.
So yeah, today we're going to talk about reducing onboarding time and errors with SharePoint. And again, it's a standard theme with me. Some people might say, well, Arnie, you fix everything with SharePoint and SharePoint lists and pages and all that. Well, it's pretty versatile. You can fix a whole lot of stuff with SharePoint. It's just a beast and a powerful tool. I don't know if you ever heard this phrase, and Jan, you can't answer it because we talked about it yesterday, but anybody at the risk of revealing your age, can you tell me what this phrase is from? My new job's a hassle and the kids have a flu.
I love it. It just makes me happy to hear that tune.
Oh, we know. Yeah, it's Yeah, nobody wants to reveal their age. It's Harry Chapin back, I think, in the mid to late 70s, Cats in the Cradle. So my new job's a hassle and the kids have the flu. A great song, but every new job is a hassle. I don't care how experienced you are in the type of work. Every job's a new hassle because you've got to learn so much new stuff. And it's also a hassle for the employer who has to get the new employee up to speed. So I'm going to have to move. Hang on. There we go. Now I can see my notes. So it really doesn't matter if you're a big business or a small business. Onboarding is new employees. It's just a scary undertaking because there are just so many potential problems, not to mention it's a lot of work. So in this day and age, it happens entirely too frequently. When you have a labor market that favors the workers, there's not very many resources out there available to hire. So when someone leaves, and they often do because somewhere else is paying more, whatever the case may be, it just happens too frequently. It's very costly. It's time consuming. There's a lot of steps, a lot of babysitting involved. And also, it takes a while to get newbies up to speed to where they're productive and they're not making so many mistakes. So a good onboarding process can streamline that, can cut down how long it takes, and help your business out quite a bit. And there's a whole lot you can do in Microsoft 365. And after we titled this webinar, I kind of wish we would have said with Microsoft 365. So while a lot of the solutions I'm going to propose are SharePoint, a lot of them are Teams, Planner, but mostly SharePoint. So employers, what's problematic for employers when you're onboarding new employees? The HR supervisor, somebody's got to babysit that new employee. Even if they're a great employee and gifted and experienced, you've still got to babysit them because your company is different from where they come from. Again, the employee is unproductive, especially when they're filling out all the forms, when they're doing book learning, etc. So, and oftentimes, especially if you're a small business and you don't, we were talking about a company of under 5 employees, 10 employees, you don't go through onboarding a lot. So, you have to hunt down those forms, find out where they're at. It's not something you have down pat. Mm-hmm. Duplicate data entry. I remember a couple of times I started new jobs myself back in the early days. It seemed like I filled the same thing in over and over and over. Kind of like when you go to the doctor's office. Mm-hmm. It drives me nuts when I check in online, fill all this stuff up, and then I show up at the doctor's office and they give me a form with all the exact same stuff. I'm thinking,
me too, Arnie.
So I don't even check in online anymore. It's not worth it. So the employee is overwhelmed. You have to take so many notes as a new employee. The grounds are new, the processes are new, the equipment is new, the work schedule is new. It's an awful lot. The new job's a hassle, in other words. Training is unstructured. Too many jobs, especially in small businesses. The training is just, go hang with Joe. Joe will teach you everything you need to know. Well, Joe's not got structured training, and then the employee learns Joe's bad habits as well. May not be the best practice. So training is unstructured. And even if you have good training, it is often forgotten because the employee is drinking from a fire hose. There's a lot of new stuff. So, and you're going to see with SharePoint what I have designed as a prototype. That information, that knowledge is always available for the employee, and especially when you use Teams, and everybody should be using Teams, in my opinion. That employee has fingertip access to all of the brains, all of the knowledge in your business. So there's 2 types of onboarding. First, there's HR onboarding, where you lead the employee through filling out company forms, tax forms, benefit forms. You've got to get them enrolled in benefits if you provide benefits. There are policies and procedures, like what's the company policies? How many vacation days? How do you sign up for paid time off? Things like that. Device and hardware setup. If it's an employee who needs a mobile device or a computer. You got to get your managed service provider or IT department to set that up before the employee can do work. You've got technology licensing. Hopefully you're signing them up for Microsoft 365, different levels of licensing for different levels of employees. And then timekeeping instructions, you get the idea. Just a whole lot to get them acclimated to your company, even if it's a tiny company. So then there's role specific onboarding. What's the person's job? What does that person need to know to do his or her work? So you need a process to teach them procedures. And, you know, we work a lot with EOS, entrepreneurial operating system clients, and it seems like they are all, or a lot of them are lacking on procedures. We've had one or two that hit it out of the park with very organized procedures. But most companies, even mid-sized companies, and I came from a mega corporation was terrible at procedures. So, but regardless, you've got to give them procedures. Here's how we do work in your department. OJT, I mentioned the problem with Joe, you learn the bad habits, all that, but even OJT, on the job training, for anyone who might not know that acronym, it needs to be structured. The location of the information, hopefully you're using Teams and SharePoint well, and it simplifies for the employee, but where is all this information stored that I need? It may be in shared drives, in the cloud, wherever, but you've got to get them acclimated to that. And if I had to name the most awesome feature of 365, it is the fact that Teams and SharePoint, but you roll SharePoint into Teams, but everything is in one place for that employee. It makes so much easier, and that new job gets to be less of a hassle. Common terms and acronyms such as OJT. What do those stand for? A new employee just cannot by osmosis know what the terms and acronyms mean. So it's good to have a glossary in your team's SharePoint environment. Layout of the plant, office, or grounds. If you have a large footprint, I remember, gosh, my first day in the mega corporation, I worked at the second largest power plant in the country, third largest in the world, and it was massive. And just learning how to get around, how to find the lunchroom, things like that. It just boggled my mind. So you got to teach them that. And then you've got the safety, environmental, legal, regulatory, the booby traps out there just ready to snag a new employee and to get your company in trouble with the regulatory agencies, or perhaps get the employee hurt. You got to make sure they know all of that. So what can you do with 365? And I tell you, one of the, you're halfway there. It's kind of like, what is it they say with Alcoholics Anonymous? Once you admit you have a problem, you're well on your way.
It's good.
Same thing with using Microsoft 365 for any processes. Half the battle is realizing that I bet 365, I bet SharePoint, I bet Teams can fix this headache that we're having. So what can you do to improve onboarding with SharePoint, Teams, etc.? Well, the steps that I would tell you, they're pretty simple. Is number one, list everything that the new employee or the regulatory agencies, whatever, list all of the resources that you need to get that new employee as quickly as possible to a productive state without hurting himself, herself, or others or equipment. Secondly, analyze each of those resources and convert them, if needed, if possible, to a better app. The 365 suite is so full. I haven't even counted them, but there are a lot of 365 apps, and especially SharePoint, Microsoft Forms. Those things are great for like converting spreadsheets to SharePoint lists, converting your task list to Planner, moving files from shared drive to Team SharePoint. And if you're not familiar, SharePoint is a repository that Teams uses to store files. A biggie is all of that tribal knowledge or all of those instructions that may be in emails, get them into Teams, especially channel posts, and I'll show you why you would do that shortly. And essentially, where possible, move things into the new generation of 365 apps. And then, as I always do, where possible, bring as much of that together on one or more SharePoint pages. And if you're not familiar with that, perhaps this is your first webinar with Jan and I and Nancy. We have previous webinars that will show you more about Microsoft lists, SharePoint lists, and how to bring them together on, we often call them dashboards, but they're SharePoint pages.
And the links, sorry, I was just going to say that in the links we did earlier, and I'll do them again at the end, you can see past recordings and see stuff on the YouTube channel. So.
Right. So if you want to learn more about lists and pages and bringing things together and aggregating things, yeah, we've got other webinars out there that will teach more about it. And then once you do that, the final step, as it almost always should be in 365, is to then place everything in a single Teams channel for onboarding. You might even have an onboarding team with different channels, one regulatory, one for corporate policies, whatever. There's just a wide variety of things you can do. And Teams is so customizable that whatever your business is, you can leverage it. So in the end, I always recommend put everything into Teams. So now, okay, Arnie, you're talking about how awesome this stuff is. I'm going to show you a little bit of it, and I'm going to be showing you a lot of the end products. And as with a lot of the webinars that I do, especially, Microsoft is changing menus, changing looks. Matter of fact, this morning, I got the new version of Teams, and I opted into it. It's awesome, by the way. But I could show you step by step where to click and all that. Microsoft changes that often. So if I were to show every step by step, there's a good chance it would be outdated within a month. So I try to tell you the general things that you should do. So let me see if I can manage the technology, and there we go. So this is my Teams environment, and this is a fictional, if you've watched my webinars, our webinars, you see Freedom Farm often. It's just a fictional company for managing our family farm. So here's this is a SharePoint page, what I often call a SharePoint dashboard, where, and if you look up at the top, you see two tabs. You see one for HR onboarding and one for kind of role specific onboarding. So I have two different dashboards that I show here. So in this case, the first thing you do with the new employee is you get them onboarded with the HR stuff. So my wife, she's the manager of the fictional farm, and she has a greeting here, and it's got nice little pictures. It makes it pretty. These are not actual employees because we have no employees. But if you look over at the right, most companies, small or large, have an onboarding checklist. So in this case, I wanted to make it self-serve where the employee can just click through, fill out the forms, do everything him or herself, and maybe talk to the HR person if they get stuck or have problems. So you can see, choose a restaurant for a team welcome lunch. That's something in our onboarding process optimization. We said, oh, we need to make them feel at home, right? So then I like to put Teams orientation on there. Teams is the brains, it is the business operating system, hopefully, of your business. Well, number one, we need to let them know what Teams is, give them an orientation, and let them see that all of this knowledge they're about to start taking on, it's all right there at their fingertips.
Hey, Arnie, quick comment there. I love that. Such a smart addition, because what we see is every company really uses Microsoft 365 slightly differently. And it's really important, especially as you have employees that maybe worked at another company using 365. They need to understand how this business uses 365. So that's actually so smart to have that in there.
Right. Yes. And you touched on something I was going to bring up, which is, you want your employees using this technology. Is not difficult at all, but they can't intuitively know it. So tell them what your rules of the road are. How do you expect them to use Teams? We have some examples. If you want to contact us, we can get that to you. But there's some good rules of engagement, rules of the road. But then you go down through here and you can see in order, we have them doing the checklist that we used to have if we were a real company. So then down at the bottom, you can see step 10, prepare for role certification. We thought we're going to make this training formal because my example here is for invasive species employees. If we had a department, it seems like all of Indiana, where I live, the invasive species are taking over. It's choking out the native plants. So we want them to kill the right plants, not kill the plants we're working hard to reestablish. And you can see right here, it says the last step will take more time, certification. Please talk to your supervisor before beginning the last step. So then that's kind of the transition from HR onboarding to teaching them how to do their work. So once they're ready to do the work, they can click here or they can click here. But then we have a dashboard teaching them how to do their job as an invasive species control technician. So there's a little text here telling them how to use the page. And here's a reminder that says you should have already completed HR onboarding. So we've got some useful links over here. You see this on a lot of the webinars that I've already done for CTC that show how to do dashboards and such. Personal protective equipment is very important. We're handling chemicals that could be not healthy if you take a bath in it. So then in order, this is how we want to teach that new employee. So I've got our department's vision and mission right there, a collapsible section. Your new role and responsibilities, which tells them as an invasive species control technician, you need to do these bullet points. You may be asked more, but this is your main job. Then a glossary of common department terms, kind of the acronyms and all. This is a SharePoint list being brought in that, oh, by the way, this list contains acronyms and terms for the entire fictional company, but it can be filtered for invasive species department or habitat department. And we go down here. This is pretty slick. Invasive species identification. We want this new employee to be well versed in, well, just what plants do we need to annihilate, nuke, whatever you want to call it. We're waging war on them. So it shows them all of the species on the farm. This is, believe it or not, this is a SharePoint list with what's called a gallery view. And it's kind of like a spreadsheet with everything that we are battling. And because it could be overwhelming to a new employee, it would tell them you'll only be tested on the serious threat species, which is only 4 or 5 of them. So get to know those inside and out. Oh, by the way, you might see that on a test when you finish certification. And then because we want those serious threats gone, from that same list, we displayed the map showing where those species are most often located. Again, that's a SharePoint list behind the scenes. So we're showing them, here's what's important. You need to learn this stuff. And by the way, they don't have to take copious amounts of notes, which is, one of the hassles of the new job. Whether your kids have the flu or not, you've got to take a lot of notes. So, and the Excel web parts for some reason lately have been really slow to download. So I intended to have this open ahead of time. But this is displaying, oh, don't make a liar out of me. It's okay.
Oh,
there we go.
Oh, perfect.
There we go. Finally downloaded. So, there's a best time to spray all of these things. So, I might overwhelm the new employee by telling them you've got to memorize all of this. So I narrowed it down to just the important things. So if it's in bold, you need to learn, when do we treat for those nasty plants? And we wait on this one to download. These are generally faster.
Arnie, I can make a couple comments while I wait.
Anyway, you get the point. So
yeah, and just for everybody listening, feel free to unmute yourself or enter comments or questions in chat. But this is such a good example of, we always talk about organization drives productivity. It's such a good example of organizing everything in a central place. It's easy to access. It's beautiful. Thanks, Arnie.
Yep, and I want to say one thing, right? Turn it back over to Jan. Is if you don't use Teams and you own a business or you're a manager, you don't really realize this benefit right away when you start using Teams. But this search engine up here, it is a Google for your business and your information. For example, tricloper, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's a chemical that we use a lot of times. So I would set a new employee down and say, do a search for these keywords and then read whatever comes up. So that employee can read all of the juicy discussions among the experienced employees about using that chemical. And I could do the same thing for other chemicals, other plants, whatever. But I would sit the new employee down and say, do keyword searches for these terms and then read the discussions. So in the old days, if you're not using Teams, these juicy discussions about subject matter are siloed in emails buried in people's inboxes, and they're unavailable to new employees. So let's go back.
Yeah, and Arnie, on that
It's,
point, that's also a reason why a lot of companies are trying to get rid of like third-party software and move everything into the Teams environment. So I mean, there's already reasons you should get rid of like tool like Asana because we have Planner and SharePoint for project management. But when it's sitting out on this tool, like an Asana, you can't search and find it within the Teams in the Microsoft ecosystem. And so it's a reason a lot of companies, not only just for simplification, want to get rid of all these third-party applications, but for just the search feature alone.
yeah, the word we hear from clients, potential clients who contact us, is integrate. We want to use it for a CRM or for EOS management because it integrates with the rest of 365, and it absolutely does. That this search engine will search text in your files, chats, posts. It searches everything, and it's AI. It's machine learning. It will learn. I could go on and on, but anyway, Jan, back to you.
Okay, yeah, let me wrap up. And Arnie, you already have one question in the chat, so I'll let you read that while I wrap up on these slides. So go ahead and bring up the
Oh, that will
final
be
slides.
doing two things at once, and
You know you
but
can't
I will read
multitask,
it.
Arnie.
I will read the chat.
Okay, I'm going to just wrap up a couple of quick slides here, and then Arnie will open up for Q&A. So a lot of people are wondering kind of what we do with 365, how do we help? We love doing these webinars to open people's eyes to the potential and the opportunity, and our goal is to help guide our clients. And so this is typically the roadmap we'll go through with clients if they're interested in our help and applying the software to solve their business issues. So we'll come in often and assess their current setup, kind of peek under their head, look at everything from a security, compliance, all of that, help migrate everything over, email data, get the data in the right place. Not a lot of people move their data to the wrong place when they're migrating over to 365 and they're not setting it up properly for full optimization. Then we move into optimize phase where we're building out extra applications like we talked about in the case study earlier, getting them to use all the various apps that sit on top of the 365 environment. And then our intention is to wrap up and train your internal resources, your power users, your end users, and your IT folks to understand how to maintain and continue to maintain the tools and not be dependent on us. I think our secret sauce falls in this little circle here. We recommend all the time one-on-one training in addition to group training. Often adoption's the biggest issue companies are having with getting people on board with 365, and a little one-on-one kind of it can make a world of difference with adoption. Rules of engagement is exactly what we were talking about earlier. It's coming up with your operations manual and how your company uses Microsoft 365. We feel this is a super important piece that companies need to define before they roll it out to the whole organization. And it's that kind of process of going around and around that really helps with full adoption of the software. Just a reminder, our webinar next month, we've got Arnie up again to talk about how to identify continuous improvements for Microsoft 365. Again, I'll enter into the chat the link. So if you want to register, it's the last link on the list. So you can go ahead and sign up now for next month. And I think that's it for me, right, Arnie? Are we up to Q&A?
That is it.
Perfect.
I was wrestling the technology again.
Awesome.
Oh,
so
it's because Zoom is not as good as Teams, but I'm sorry I brought up that. So
that's okay. That's awesome. So everyone, thank you for being here. I have to bug out a little bit earlier. Arnie's going to take it from here and answer any questions. But thank you for attending. We appreciate it. Please tell your friends. All right, Arnie, take it away.
Okay, Jan, see you. Bye. So I see in the chat, there's a question: to create something like this, do you create all the pages in SharePoint first and then link it to Teams channel? Yes. You can have the Teams channel first, but to put the tab across the top, yes, you've got to create it in SharePoint first. And when you add the tab in Teams, there are multiple ways to do it. You'll see a SharePoint option, a SharePoint Pages option, and where I guess there's a lists option where you can do lists. But yeah, if you build a dashboard, the SharePoint Pages option for adding a new tab works well, and you can it will give you your recent SharePoint pages you can pick from, or you can simply paste the URL to that SharePoint dashboard or SharePoint page into the new tab dialog box. So thank you for that question. What else is there?
Arnie, it looks like Joe has his hand up.
Okay, yeah, again.
No, I think I was trying to just say hi, bye Jan. Good stuff, as always.
Thank you for the comment. Okay. So, yeah, if there are no other questions, next month's webinar, let me go back to that a second. I'm really looking forward to that one. It's not so much about the technology, but again, half of the battle is realizing that you have a problem or realizing that something could be improved with 365. So next month, I hope you come back. I'm going to show how you might quickly find areas in your business where 365 could, when leverage, could streamline it, and often very quickly, like within minutes or hours. So looking forward to that one. So last chance for questions. All right, well, thanks. Whoops. I do see a question in the chat. How does OneNote work with SharePoint and Teams? Nancy is our OneNote guru. Jan knows a little bit, and I think Jan is heading off to a doctor's appointment. But OneNote can be placed as a tab inside of a Teams channel, and it works quite well then. So that, again, your employees do not have to leave Teams, which is our goal. It's great if they can do all of their work in Teams. And also, again, Teams sent out, I got the option to use the new version of Teams today. So if you've not used that, it's awesome. But they recently got rid of the wiki, which was good riddance, because if you remember, a wiki tab came by default. It was not good in that it did not automatically back up. So if you put a lot of stuff into your wiki and someone accidentally deleted it, that was not good. It was gone forever. So lots of people like to leverage OneNote, and so it's kind of in a gradual rollout phase, but you will see that in new Teams channels that you build, you will have a notes tab. I think it's called notes. I don't yet have it in my version of Teams, but yeah, you have a notes tab rather than a wiki tab. So
Hey,
they're
Arnie.
integrating it well. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I recall that Nancy did one of these noon hour webinars on OneNote and the integration maybe last spring. So it should be available on one of the feeds if the person that asked the question went back and looked. You could probably find it.
There you go. Yeah, Nancy is really good at OneNote. Jan is pretty good at OneNote. I use it when I have to, just because I love SharePoint. I use SharePoint for everything. So, you know, there are different ways to do different things in 365. You just got to decide what you prefer. So, what other questions might there be? All right. With that said, I hope y'all have a great day. Enjoy the fall weather if it's nice where you are, and we'll see you next month.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our webinar today. My name is Jan Lehman. I'm the owner of CTC Productivity, and we've been doing these webinars for many years. And so if you want to check out some of our past webinars, you have a couple options. One is you can head over to our website, ctcproductivity.com, and look underneath resources and then webinars, and you'll see all our past recordings we've been doing for the past few years. And there's also a link there then to register for the next upcoming webinar. The other option for you is head over to YouTube and find our CTC Productivity channel, and be sure and subscribe while you're there so you're sure not to miss any other recordings that come out. And if you're curious about our Microsoft 365 services and how we can help you leverage the power of Microsoft 365, feel free to check out information about that service on our ctcproductivity.com website. Just look under areas of expertise and productivity consulting, and we share a little bit about how we work there. And be sure and fill out the contact page while you're there. So yeah, we can set up a meeting and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. So thanks so much. Again, Jan Lehman with CTC Productivity. Have a great day.